available. Let me remind you of that. And actually Zoom just this week when we were playing around with it, changed their closed captioning. So it's much better than it used to be. Very, very accurate this time. You guys can see that, okay. All right. So my name is Mindy Gumpert. I'm the president of the Virginia Council for Learning Disabilities. Actually, Richard, do you want to go to the next screen? And I would like to welcome you all today to our webinar. Thank you. Let's see, it looks like we have 79 participants. Thank you for spending your Friday afternoon with us. We know it's been a long week and we really appreciate that you are taking the time out of your crazy lives to spend some time with us and to learn about culturally responsive teaching. The link for the presentation will be available to you. The PowerPoint is available. It's on the presentation. It's here as well. I don't normally do all the logistics. I'm trying to remember. Chat, if you have anything that you'd like to say, chat. I may interrupt the presenters and ask the question, or they may, or we may save the questions until the end of all the presentations. So we'll have 3 presentations tonight, and they're going to be spectacular. I'm really excited about the presentations. Richard, can you get to the next slide? Thanks. So as I said, I'm the president of the Virginia Council for Learning Disabilities. Dr. Lisa Morin is behind the scenes. She never wants to be seen on camera, but she's the president-elect. And she is our tech genius. That was a little giggle. And Brenda Jean Tyler is also on our VCLD board. Hey, Brenda. So VCLD is collaborating with the Virginia Council for Exceptional Children on a series of these 4 webinars. And we are thrilled to be collaborating with Virginia CEC. We've had a lot of fun, and it's just a great partnership that we've developed. So thank you to Virginia CEC. Could you switch the slide, Richard?
Not this one.
Yeah. Yes, that one. Thank you. So tonight the presenters will be from the Virginia Council for Exceptional Children Diversity Committee. And this is a newly formed committee. We have a lot of fun on it. We actually have also read the book Culturally Responsive Teaching and the Brain in our book club. So a lot of our information for the presentations came from that book tonight. So I just want to share the Virginia CEC Diversity Committee mission that we recently developed with you. So the Virginia CEC Diversity Committee's mission is to promote and support diverse, exceptional learners and their families, educators and practitioners, advance opportunities for equity and inclusion, and engage in research-based activism across the state. So we're just getting started, but we're going to crush it. We're going to do some great things. And so this is the first, this is the unveiling of the Diversity Committee. So be kind to all of my colleagues. Let's see. Yes, you can watch this on YouTube later. We'll throw the link for the presentation in the chat. And at the end of the presentation, there will also be on the last slide a link for a certificate of attendance. So you can turn that in for your professional development points. So that's on there also. Oh, okay. So anyway, without further ado, I'm going to let Richard, who is the chair of the Virginia Council for Exceptional Children Diversity Committee, take it away.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm actually going to stop my share so I can see you. Hello, I'm Richard Williams. I am the Virginia Council of Exceptional Children CAN coordinator and diversity committee chair. I'm really excited to be here with you all tonight. I'm going to do a quick presentation on just what culturally responsive education is, and then we're going to move into 2 kind of smaller presentations. I'll join you again at the end when I join my colleague Mel to talk about behavior, but I just wanted you to be able to see my face before I shared my screen again. So give me 1 second and let me pull that right back up. There it is. All right. So culturally responsive education or teaching, it comes by various names. It was really kind of started in 1995 by Dr. Gloria Ladson Billings in her article called Toward a Theory of Culturally Relevant Pedagogy. In that article, she proposed three main goals when really trying to teach specifically to students of African-American descent, but it really works across cultures. And that is to teaching to produce academic success, teaching to develop positive ethnic and cultural identities, and also teaching students to think critically of current events in society. So we want them to be able to, demonstrate academic progress, develop a positive self-image, and then also think critically about what's going on in the world. Following Dr. Billings, Geneva Gay came in and actually really kind of set the groundwork on some very specific teaching strategies. And she defined and used the term culturally responsive teaching, and she defined it as using the cultural knowledge, prior experiences, frames of reference, and performance styles of ethnically diverse students to make learning encounters more relevant and effective for them. Following Geneva Gay, Django Paris expands CRT, and he really brought in the idea of student identities and cultures and how they evolve over time, right? So for example, we may grow up with one worldview as a child, but as we go through puberty and adolescence, we may identify in the LGBT community. So that kind of changes our identity as we evolve. And then Hammond and Jackson also published Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain in 2015, which was the book that was referred to earlier, which really brings in a lot of neuroscience behind why we should do culturally responsive teaching. So what is culture? When we're talking about culture, culture is really how the brain processes the world. People often, think of culture as just style of dress or food, maybe spirituality and things like that, but it really impacts how the brain processes how it interacts with the world, how it perceives knowledge, what's right, what's wrong, so on and so forth. And there are several layers of culture. So we kind of start at the surface layer, which is those things I mentioned earlier, kind of the more observable and concrete elements, your food, your style of dress, style of architecture, that kind of thing. And then we get into a shallow level of culture, which is kind of the unspoken rules of a culture. And then if we get deep into culture, we start talking about worldview, ethics, spirituality, views on health, and what's most important. Some cultures promote a more plant-based diet versus a omnivore diet, kind of things like that. And this, in this deep culture level, this is where we really learn. This is where we associate new knowledge with prior experiences and our own lived experiences as we kind of move those into long-term memory. And then there are typically two types of archetypes for culture when we're looking at them, very broad. There's several more, but the two broad camps are collectivism and individualism. So collectivism really emphasizes on relationships and interdependence. About roughly 80% of the world has a more collectivist culture. And then we followed up by the rest of the 20%, which participate in more of an individualized kind of cultural archetype, which is emphasis on the individual achievement and independence. The United States is a more of an individualism style archetype versus, say, China. And then, so, what does culturally responsive teaching have to do with the brain? Why is this something that, really, how does this impact the brain? So the brain seeks to minimize social threats and maximize opportunities to connect with others in the community. And if we follow along with that, then positive relationships keep our safety threat detection system in check. When a student or a person in general is at a relaxed and calm state, they're able to learn. So we want to make a classroom that enables students to learn. And then culture guides how we process information, right? If we think back a slide or two ago when we were looking at the deep level of culture, when we're talking about worldview and ethics, how we process historical events, who was right, who was wrong, is this good for me, is this bad for me, those sorts of things really are impacted by culture and how we store that information. And then attention drives learning. All and new information, needs to be coupled with existing funds of knowledge in order to be learned. So we've got to relate it to something. If we're learning something completely unrelatable, it's going to be very difficult to near impossible to really master. One of the first things you do when you learn a new language is you learn their alphabet. We're familiar with the concept of an alphabet, so it helps us to kind of gain that new knowledge of a whole new alphabet. And then the brain actually grows, physically grows through challenge and stretch, expanding its ability to be more complex, to do more complex thinking and learning. So when we engage our students with a diverse curriculum, right, and we present them with views that are different from theirs, it really makes their brain physically grow as they kind of chew on these new ways of looking at the same problem. Or the same issue or same topic. So it literally grows our students' minds. So what does CRT kind of look like in school? Well, in instruction, right, all cultures are represented in the curriculum. Students should, experience ideas presented from various perspectives. So give me some examples of that. That would be diverse readings in English, studying Black, Indigenous, people of color, biopic, scientists, creatives, or historians, maybe reading primary documents from both sides of a historical event, right? So we could take it in the hyper-political world we're in today, and if we're looking at the election of George Bush and Al Gore, we could look at both of their debates. We could read transcripts from their debates, right? So there's two different cultures, the Democratic culture and the Republican culture or mindset. So we really want to provide students with both sides or as many sides as possible to really allow them to expand their knowledge base. And then when we're looking at behavior, we're looking at behavior that is respecting of practices of all cultures and doesn't promote the ideals of one culture over another. So for example, a very popular behavioral support program was positive behavior interventions and supports. Recently, some research has shown that this also may actually contribute to the school to prison pipeline because traditional PBIS was formed with behavioral expectations of the dominant culture. So there's been new research and growing research on culturally responsive PBIS, which takes some of those hard and fast definitions of what it means to be a good student and puts it in a more culturally responsive lens. Some students are more physical. They may like to hold hands with their friend, not necessarily their significant other, but a friend, or they may hug. And that's just the way the culture works. Whereas sometimes our dominant culture frowns on that, or they may like to talk in the hall at a respectable level where other cultures may not. So really kind of defining what good behavior looks like that includes all cultures. And then what does the physical environment look like? So cultures are represented and celebrated throughout the building through decoration, maybe special rooms or areas. So you may have a special place for prayer. If you have students that practice Islam and they need to pray, you would physically have a space for them to do that. That shows them that, the school is built to include them. Other examples could be posters of diverse icons, promoting positive behavior or academic achievement. It could be really celebrating all the various themed months that we have in school, Latino History Month, African American History Month. October is also LGBT plus History Month. So really kind of showing all those different faces of the different cultures in the school really helps support a more culturally responsive environment. Trying to get my slide to move on. So I've kind of given you the ideas, the history behind it, some of the research, but really, why do we participate in culturally responsive education or teaching or practices, or whichever label you really want to put on it? And I think that comes down to the role of education and how we define what we're doing as educators. You know, we're here to not only teach reading, math, arithmetic, science, history, those sorts of things, but we're really trying to help students learn who they are and become independent thinkers and not dependent on everyone. So we want to really respect and honor them and affirm them in their learning. We want to engage in culturally responsive teaching to tap down that flight or fight mechanism in students when they live in a society that may hate them, or all they see on social media are police brutalizing them, or xenophobic messages painted on buildings and things like that. School should be a safe place for students to come and learn. And in order for that to happen, it has to be in a culturally responsive way. So I kind of wanted to give the opportunity to some of our diversity committee members to kind of maybe chime in on, you know, some examples that you've seen on how culturally responsive teaching has impacted some of your students.
Actually, Richard, I think it would open it up to all the participants.
That would be great too.
You
I'm
can
not
shout
sure
it
how.
out, write it in the
Yes,
chat.
we can shout it out, or we can put it in the chat.
Well, this is Ron Marsh from Roanoke. I'm a student at Mary Baldwin. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yes.
I think this is a great topic. I'm in a urban middle school here where it's very diverse. And I think that this is a great topic right now, even though we are virtual in teaching students, but the environment, you spoke of environment. It's very important that we have the right kind of environment as that student, whether it's ELL or what ethnic group is from. When they entered my classroom, that it be comfortable for them. The environment should be inclusive, like pictures of their country, their culture, different cultures besides just one.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes our classroom is a reflection of us. You know, it's not necessarily thinking about our other students. I've taught for 18 years. I was a co-teacher for 9 years, and thinking about this presentation today, I was going in my mind, you know, through all of my classrooms, and they were beautiful. They were great classrooms, but, you know, the decorations were all over, you know, they were brilliant, but they were not culturally responsive environments in terms of the way the classroom looked and the way it was set up. And I'm, you know, embarrassed to say that, but I have to admit that they were not. So I'm curious to know the teachers nowadays. I mean, is that something that you think about? Okay, this school year was a little different. Let's maybe roll it back to last year. But when you're getting your classroom ready for the first, you know, the first day of school, are you thinking about presenting a culturally responsive classroom?
I teach in Franklin, Virginia, and in my classroom last year, I shared a montage of things that I do within my community, along with my children and my grandchildren. So then the students could see that it was, I'm just not that teacher. I am a mother, a grandmother, a community person within the community. I work with any type of student, and they saw all of that. And when they came in my room, well, Miss Long, who is this and who is that, and who is that little baby? So they were engaged. And then when I was ready to engage with teaching, they were more comfortable with me than they might have been with somebody else. So I brought my community into their community because I live 45 minutes away. So I'm not even in the same city with them. So, but I brought my community into their community so they could see that we're all the same and we do all the same thing. So I really enjoyed doing my room like that last year.
I love that. It's a great idea.
I have constantly always let the kids know that I'm human. You know, like if I had a bad night, they would know, you know, because they have to know you're human or they won't respect you. They won't work for you, because students don't work for teachers they don't like. I mean, let's be honest, they don't. And I've always seen my classroom as an extension of my house. And then I let the kids help me, you know, decorate it and feel like they're part of it, because I want them to always wanted them to feel safe in my room, because my students have always been the students in the school district that nobody wants. So I've always tried to make them feel extra special.
Awesome. All right. So thank you, everyone, for really kind of chiming in and joining in that discussion. I think sometimes as teachers or professors, we get stuck in the research, but I wanted to honor the lived experiences of how, you know, being culturally responsive really impacts our students. So I do have a couple references that you can see when you look at the PowerPoint on your own. So we are actually going to transition to one of our first kind of second mini presentation. This one will be brought to you by Naveen Youssef and Dr. Amber Peacock. You all can take it away.
All right. I'm Amber Peacock, and I teach at Randolph-Macon College, and it is my privilege to be with you here today. I'm going to interview Naveen Youssef. Naveen has taught special ed for 15 years, and over the years, she's worked in both inclusive and even some self-contained classrooms with students with all diverse disabilities, autism, emotional and behavior disorders, LD, OHI, IED, and multiple disabilities. She's done it all. She's currently working on her doctorate and teaches special education in Northern Virginia. And she's been an advocate of inclusive, culturally responsive teaching for many, many years. And I've thoroughly enjoyed getting to visit with her and hear some of her stories. And so that's what we want to do today. Naveen, thank you so much for letting me interview you. Tell us a little bit about how you came to be a special education teacher.
Thank you, Amber, for the nice introduction. My background, so my undergrad, I'm a French interpreter. So when I moved to the US, I wanted to be a French teacher, and I was working on that. And then I started work as a substitute teacher. And I'm gonna tell you, sadly, in Egypt, we don't have special education classes. That is, so when I came and I had the opportunity to work as a long-term sub with kids with special needs, I fall in love with it. And then I started to work as a teacher assistant, and I was offered to sign into a program, which is, they call it the Atlas program 15 years ago. And it's like 6 credit hours and you get a conditional license as a special ed teacher. And while I was working on that, I also learned that I have to be highly qualified. So I had to go and take classes to be highly qualified. And then after I was done, I was lucky enough there was something called teachinvirginia.com, and they had a job fair from school all over Virginia. So I went to Richmond to go to that job fair, and I was offered a job on the spot.
That's wonderful. I'm so glad that you're in the field. I'm curious, tell us what it's like to be an Egyptian woman teaching in the American school system.
So it was a huge shock for me because I was in a Catholic school. I had nuns. I had to wear a uniform to school every day. If you wear something against the rules, like for example, God forbid you have a red something in your hair or blue shoes and it's supposed to be black, you are in trouble. And with the nuns, they will take it and you never see it again. And they will tell you it's going to the poor people. Like, there is no chance your parents cannot go and get it back. It's gone. So then I start to stop and I start to go to like classrooms, and then I see kids laying on the floor reading a book, or, I would see kids coming with like, I don't know, girls short dresses and things like that. It's all the things that I saw in my school. And then I get to learn that is gang activities. For example, I had no clue what is gang activities. So it was a big shock for me. But then when I started to learn and like study about special education world, lots of my point of view changed.
You said that you taught in a self-contained classroom early in your career. How did you advocate for your students to be included in the school community?
So some of the thing I did, sadly, some school district will put the kids regarding of their label, not their ability. So I had a student, he was very, very, very smart. He was in second grade and he was reading in fifth grade level, and he was in a self-contained classroom. He would just go out for art and music and PE. So I called for a meeting. I had my special ed supervisor, I had the general education teacher, the school psychologist, the mom, and the student. And I made him read things in like word and passages and fourth grade and fifth grade and answer question, things like that. And then I was able to convince the committee and he went to inclusion. And I'm not saying that testing, it's the best thing, but when he did the SOL, he got 600 on everything. So I feel like we need to watch out, you know, when we are, where we are putting our kids and placing them. Also, some of the things I did, because, you know, I'm the troublemaker wherever I go, advocating for my kids. When they are in self-contained, some school districts are segregating them. They just leave them in the self-contained classroom and they are not going out. So I was able to voice some of my concern and make them go to art and music and classes like that. I had to advocate for them to go to field trips because like there was an occasion where my administrator told me, no, I don't want you to send the paper home. The student is not welcome to go to this field trip, which was very sad because I think it was supposed to be the parent who make that call. And also other things, one of the things that I did was, it was very exciting for me to start a business. Lots of school districts now are doing the CBI, the community-based instruction, and we go and we have to complete the I'm determined form, helping our kids do that. So I started a business for my student, which is basket for all occasion, which make them like during lunchtime, for the other kids, like all grade levels, they go to sell the baskets, which make them entertain with the kids and interact and get money and things like that.
Ah, thank you. It's good to hear the work you're doing to include those students from a self-contained classroom. When you started working in a collaborative, what we would say a more inclusive setting, did you still have to advocate for those students to be included? And if so, how?
Sadly, yes. Because I'm not saying all general ed teachers are not nice or anything. I had the opportunity to work with nice ones who were willing to work with me, and I would help them. I would teach. If they have kids in the classroom, they need help, I would pull them in my small group. But also, sadly, I had an occasion where my student had some behavior. All he wanted was acknowledgement from his general ed teacher, and he would not want my help. Like, he would raise his hand and I would say, what do you need? He said, no, I need the help from the teacher. She doesn't like me. And he took it in a bad way. So I had to meet with her and I had to explain to her, all he wants from you is acknowledgement. I saw him, I'm gonna help him. And of course, what I heard, I have like 20 kids in my room, I don't have the time. So, you know, what I made was cards, like I need to see the teacher, I need to see Miss Yusuf, I need a break, things like that. And I told her, you don't have to go right away. Just when he show you the card, I need help from my teacher, just give him a thumbs up. And it worked for her to just give him the thumbs up, calm him down.
Very good. Tell me how you've worked to create inclusive, culturally responsive relationships with the families of your students.
So my philosophy is to always talk to the parents. If you get an email from a parent about any concern, all I do is, please let me know what day and time work for you and a good phone number, and I call them. And now with learning distance, I do lots of Google Meet and things like that, because when you talk to them, you build a relation. My big thing is to build relation and trust with the parents. When they trust me, you know, everything will go smoothly. So I talk to them a lot. Also, like there was an occasion, and I think because of my background as a Middle Eastern, there was a meeting, like re-evaluation meeting, where the mom came, and then when she learned that the designee is a male, she refused to come into the meeting. And she said, I'm sorry, I cannot go because there is a male, because in her culture, she cannot talk in front of male people, like any male present. So I had to go. I said, just give me a second. And I was lucky enough for my designee and my team to understand. And we were able to get a female designee and do the meeting. Also, I think it's really important when you go to a meeting. I always like IEP meeting, I show the parents in the meeting what their kids can do. So I always have some example of work the kids did. Before the meeting, I go to talk to related service, and I talk to general ed teacher, because I think it's really important when you go to a meeting, you are all prepared and you look as a team working together.
Thanks, Naveen. What advice would you give other special education professionals about creating an inclusive, culturally responsive climate in their classrooms and schools?
So I think they need to, if I know I'm getting a kid from a specific country or culture, it would be good if you go and like Google some information about it, because you know what, some culture, the kids doesn't supposed to do eye contact, for example, with older people. You know, you would be standing yelling at the kid, look at me or whatever, and it's not his culture. Also, it's good when you know some of the culture, because you know, when you are talking to the parents, you can show them how you know about the culture, how you respect the culture. Making sure you have, if you know your student is celebrating a specific holiday, just say, you know, happy holiday. And I like to send small, like not a big gift, but I always do that. I send a small gift with happy holiday to the family and to the student. So, and just keep communicating with the parent and try to give them positive things about their kids. That will be good. Don't call them for just bad things happening, but good things.
Yeah, thanks so much, Naveen. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask Naveen about her experiences as a special educator, advocating for more culturally responsive instruction?
What do you think the best thing that you've ever done for a student, a culturally or linguistically diverse student is? Like what's the most brilliant thing you've done to help your students? You can brag. You go ahead.
I can brag. Okay, I can brag. All right. So one of the things I really like to do is working with kids with autism. It's my thing. And going to one of the training, it was like a conference, and I met Paula Kluth, is give him the whale, just give him the whale. And when we understand this, your life is going to be easy. So she explained to us that we all have an obsession to something. So like I know me, I like shoes, which is really bad because I have tons of shoes. I have to buy shoes. So when you understand this, things will get better with behavior. So I had a student and everybody was telling me, oh, you're gonna have a bad year. He ran around, he's misbehaving and things like that. And all I had to know is he liked dinosaurs and he liked Doritos.
Oh, there you go.
This is all I had to know. So I created a corner of my classroom. I went and I bought big poster of like dinosaurs and I put it around in a corner. When he came to the room, just a smile on his face made my day. And then I would tell him work and eat. So I would get the Doritos, and it had to be spicy Doritos. It had to be.
Right.
So I would get a plate and I put Doritos, and I put the work, and we went from him sitting for 5 minutes to a whole hour doing work. And he was nonverbal, and he would open the classroom and he would run around, and we don't know why. Poor thing. He wanted to go to the bathroom. I did not have a bathroom in my room, and he was not able to tell me bathroom or I need a drink of water. So I got little card that said eat, drink, things like that, and I put it behind the door. So before he opened the door, he would look at it, he would pull it out, and then give it to me. And as soon as he give it to me, I like right away I go with him to get a drink of water or to go to the bathroom. And he was nonverbal, and my whole career, I'm gonna tell you, he made me cry when he called me one day. I was in the middle of the classroom, and I heard something, and he said Yusuf, and I said, you are kidding, and he really said Yusuf. And this was the most, I don't know, like everything I did in one side and this, like, it was the best moment of my life.
Oh, that's a beautiful story, Naveen. Thank you for sharing that.
Could I ask a question?
Go right ahead.
I was just wondering if you find yourself having to explain to other faculty members about the cultural differences to kind of make it more acceptable to them.
So if you are talking about myself, I'm gonna tell you, sadly, I worked in some school district where I was not really respected because of my accent. I would be corrected in front of other teachers because I pronounced word or like said the word not the right way, which make me embarrassed. And you will see me like, I don't want to be in the teacher lounge. I don't want to talk to people because I'm not respected. Yes, I have an accent, but having an accent doesn't mean I'm stupid and I cannot understand.
Right.
Just have an accent,
So have you tried to enlighten your colleagues? Like, is that something that you can do, or they just are too close-minded?
Very close-minded. When they make fun of you, what you are gonna do? You try one time, two time, and then when they are, and they think it's funny, they are correcting you, and then they are laughing, and so
Wow.
you feel like it's hopeless case, like so. And really, when it's about me, I take the side, like I don't want to talk to them. But when it's about my student, I'm gonna tell you, I'm really a troublemaker, and I am sometimes I'm not liked because I voice my concern about my students.
I think you're making good trouble for your students.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's a good thing to advocate for them. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have questions for Naveen? All right, well, if that's the case, then we can pass this on to Mel and Richard. You can start with your section.
Actually, we have a few minutes. I'm trying to keep up with the chat, and there's so much good stuff.
Oh, okay. I haven't been watching the chat.
Oh my gosh, there's great stuff. So anybody that just posted in the chat, would you like to just share? You don't have to put your camera on if you don't want to. But if we do, I think you should, but I'm just saying. Anyway, would you like to share your story with the group? Because there's some amazing stuff in the chat. I'm not gonna put you on the spot, but if anybody wants to share now, would be a great time because we have a few minutes. I didn't even get finished reading it all.
Hello. Yes, I just want to because I teach preschool autism classroom in Fairfax County Public Schools. And so I had the opportunity in the past, before we had the COVID, to go into the families' homes. And that gave me the opportunity to really know what goes on in their life and trying to find a compromise with that, with the applied behavior. It's the analysis of principles and their culture. And within that happens. So when that happens, the families grow that trust and that bond. And I think it's so important to ask them questions. That is huge. Because when you start asking them questions, they feel like they're actually part of this process in creating, success for their child. And this did not mean, I've been teaching for 13 years. This did not happen to me in my first year at all. I think it's just through experience and through negative experiences, and I'll get also, actually today I had a conference with two parents. One parent was speaking in Mandarin and the other parent speaks Urdu. And I had an interpreter that speaks Mandarin. So I was talking to English with her. Then she was speaking Mandarin with the father. And then the father was translating it in Urdu with the mother. And we came up with the best plan ever. And everyone, it was such a beautiful thing. I mean, I've never had a conversation with 3 languages going on at the same time. And we created a plan for their a child. And the mother's eyes, she just started crying. She goes, "Thank you so much for understanding me." And I'm like, no, like, I'm here to help you and I want to help your child. So I've never had that experience. And it's so funny because I had this experience today and now we're, discussing this topic. And I think it's just, I know what I'm doing is a lot of work up that front. It is a lot of work, but it will pay off. It will get easier. And I think a lot of teachers get discouraged in taking that extra step. But you know what? If you take the extra step now, it's going to make things so much easier down the road. So that's it.
That was
What a great
awesome.
example of culturally responsive interactions with families. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
I wanted to shout out Kristen and her story about being identified in as gifted in kindergarten, but struggling with an undiagnosed emotional disability. I think that brings up a really good point that sometimes when we think of special education, we only think of the disabilities and categories like that, but we forget gifted education and how, for lack of better words, lackluster the diversity is on the gifted side of the spectrum. There are very few identified students of various cultures, and then even within that curriculum, the cultures aren't necessarily represented. And then we have instances like Kristen's where you're twice exceptional, and so that culturally responsive piece really helps build that relationship that we've been talking about for the past few minutes. As we navigate how to provide an education for a twice exceptional and culturally diverse student. We have to take all of those things into account, because we have to know how both of those exceptionalities, impact the student and the family and their view of exceptionalities. And some cultures may be a little more resistant to either end of the spectrum or both ends of the spectrum. So I think that was a really good point. And thank you for sharing, Kristen.
I can talk more about it if you want.
Sure. I didn't want to put you on the spot, so I was just going to call you out for
I
it.
did. I put her on the spot. Sorry.
Okay.
Just a little bit. Also, if you hear any jingling in the background, that's my service dog wandering around. Yes, it's you. So, my parents always knew that I was gifted. It was kind of quite obvious. I was that weird kid in the toddlers class who was greeting parents at the door, speaking in paragraphs. So it was kind of undeniable to the special educators that I was gifted and they were going to have to put me in the gifted program at some point. But the principal of my elementary school was kind of oppositional to twice exceptional students. So he decided that since I couldn't control my behavior, which was not my fault, he said that I didn't belong in the gifted program. So he was going to have me purposefully excluded, even though when we took the COGAT in 2nd grade, I got the highest score in the school. as told by my search teacher. So she had a huge problem with them excluding me from the gifted education program. And what ended up happening is that she was pregnant the year that she had to fight for me to get into the program. So she handed it off to a sub that she had trained. And the sub lost her job, putting me in the gifted program against the principal's will. So it was actually a very dramatic time. And the principal got fired years later for a monetary scheme he ended up running at the school. But it was well recognized that he had a thing against students with disabilities. He was best friends with our superintendent, and he restructured our school districting to cut out a student with cerebral palsy to bring up the school test scores. So I think that what a lot of people have been failing to recognize with disabilities is that the bias is still out there, even though we talk about it a lot and people are being very open about how disabilities affect their lives. There's still people who are just so opposed to having disabled people be part of their school community that they will go to any incredible length to keep them out. So I just wanted to tell you guys about my horrible elementary school principal who illustrated both anti-minority and anti-disability
Thank you for sharing.
biases. Thank you.
I think you bring another good point up that students, exceptional students, create their own cultures within the building that we also have to appreciate and affirm and accommodate, right? We want to appreciate and affirm and accommodate students who may be at either end of the spectrum and include them in our curriculum. So not only should we, you know, have a culturally, you know, in terms of like ethnicity diverse school, but we're also talking gender and religion and or just ability status in general, all those sorts of things. You know, when we're talking about a culture, should be represented and should be thought of, because from my career in self-contained and public day level ED settings, you know, my kids have a completely different culture than some of the other students, and really kind of getting them to accept and affirm their own culture and then exposing others to that was really kind of therapeutic for them as they develop their own selves.
Great. So Kristen, you're a rock star. I hope you're looking at all the accolades in the chat for sharing your story. Thank you so much. Karen, I just wanted to say, I've never heard this, but I'm going to use this forever and ever because people say that I have an accent and I don't. I'm from Indiana, but I don't have an accent. But she said, if somebody makes fun of your accent, remind them that you have an accent means that you have mastered at least one other language. I mean, I love that. So yeah, so we all could speak 2 languages.
And by the way, I speak 3 languages.
Of course you can.
I do speak French, English, and Arabic. I was in French school my whole life.
Wow. Shout out to Brandy, another Indiana girl. Okay, I'm gonna stop talking. Richard, you take it away.
Okay, so we're gonna kind of transition from relationships to more a focus on like behavior and how we would support students in a culturally responsive behavioral way. So I'm going to zoom through a couple slides, and these kind of support the interview that we just listened to. And then we've got, there we go, behavioral strategies for a culturally responsive classroom. And for this, I get the pleasure of co-presenting with Mel Wilcox. So we're gonna go through and just let Mel kind of introduce herself.
Well, I mean, you know, we all have our education, but I think the most important thing that I would say I've taught in self-contained ED classrooms, been out back of the school system in a portable, been shoved around from room to room because they didn't want these kids. And I've taught in a juvenile detention center. You know, I've done numerous FBAs and BIPs. And this diversity to me is dear to my heart, because I think we do not appreciate, especially our SPED students, the diversity they bring to us. And they're seen sometimes as, you know, outcasts.
All right, thank you. And then we've got a little bit about me, my education as well. I have a career that's focused or specialized primarily on students with emotional disabilities, autism, anything that involves behavior, that kind of thing, literacy as well, and of course, culturally responsive practices.
So I always start off wanting people to understand what influences the behavior when a student comes into your room. Believe it or not, they don't walk into the general ed classroom or the school wanting to just disrupt everything. You know, a lot of them have no support from home. They're definitely, some of them not motivated. You know, that bus ride, I don't know if any general ed teachers have ridden one, they might want to ride one. You get an argument with your parents or your siblings or something. Peer pressure in and out of school can make somebody have a negative behavior. You know, the bulliness among girls too, the way they can do it so non-verbally can be just vicious. Some of these kids have neighborhood violence and homework's not important to them when they get home. Some of them might not even have friends, or their friends are just awful. And a lot of times, students, when they come to us, you know, that IEP transfer, those kids are scared, you know, and that is crucial. We've got to understand that. I mean, how did you feel when you moved somewhere? Some of them, I know for a fact where I live, they don't even have running water. They do not get a bath sometimes. There's no heat, no food, you know, and some of our kids in our district, they rely on our breakfast and our lunch. Again, they're not clean and they don't fit the normal for what some teachers want in their classroom. Some of them are depressed, they're anxious, they're angry, they're sad. They've been rejected by their family because they're seen as, quote, stupid or not normal. Here's a big one for me, is they're misunderstood and criticized by teachers. I get so irritated when somebody will bring a student to me to run through eligibility and I've never even heard of the student, but they want to say, well, they just don't fit in. It's not even their accent, they just don't fit in. And when I go look at the student, I can see numerous of one of these that the teacher didn't even try to address.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Richard. Oh, you would say about the video?
Oh, yes. So there is a really good video called Children See, Children Do. It's linked in for time purposes. We want, and technology, I don't want to crash my computer trying to switch screens and stuff, but do check out that video if you get a chance. So I want to kind of talk about what culture has to do with things when we're talking about behavior. So being a culture responsive practitioner really demands a lot of inside work, right? You have to develop within yourself the right mindset. You have to put self-care as a priority, especially in 2020. Self-care is a non-negotiable. You know, that could be yoga or walking or reading or an age-appropriate beverage after work, before bed as you're watching, you know, the latest Netflix episode. Really engaging in self-reflection, how we've been doing all night, you know, looking at how we maybe had really awesomely decorated classrooms, but were they necessarily inclusive, and going, you know, they were great looking, but maybe they excluded. So next time I can, or this time I will, or the experience with the trilingual meeting, you know, really reflecting on that and how that made everyone in that meeting feel and how that's going to impact and propel that student, you know, just because now that the parents feel, you know, affirmed and accepted and cared for, that's going to trickle down to the student. You know, the student is going to feel even more affirmed and empowered and work even harder because they know they have the support not only of their teacher, but their parents are right there with them. So really engaging in self-reflection on both the positive and the negative, and checking our own implicit biases. I think, yeah, along with implicit biases, I would also offer, your privilege. We all have, everyone has a certain amount of privilege in a certain situation. We may not have all the privileges across all situations, but there are certain privileges that we all share that someone doesn't have. So really kind of checking those and our biases, and really practicing social emotional awareness of ourselves. How are we responding to various cultures as we see them throughout the day? Because our children and our students really mirror what we do. They, if they see us avoid a certain person, they may start making assumptions and things like that. And then we want to really hold an inquiry stance regarding the impact of our interactions with students. How are we making our students feel? I think we've kind of driven home the point tonight that relationship is critical. And without a positive and healthy relationship between student and teacher, teacher and family, everyone involved, education and learning just isn't really going to happen.
I think this one kind of wraps up a lot, but building a rapport is not just with the parent, the guardian, but the students. We have to kind of wrap everything up in once. And, the points of connection, there's a couple that are really important, like selective vulnerability, building respect through connecting via shared vulnerability. Like I told you, like my husband was military, and when my students would know he would leave, they knew I was sad. They'd be like, "Miss Mel, are you okay?" And I'm like, "I'll be okay. Let's just keep rolling. Let's get the day going." I let them know one time when my dog died. I know it sounds sad, but I could not hold back my tears. And a couple of my boys that never even had a dog didn't understand, but I shared it with them.
I think another way to build that connection is looking at the concern, right? Sharing concern for events and ideas, and also life events. Even with our younger students, I taught mainly middle and high school, but even with our earlier childhood students, really just kind of acknowledging what's going on in the world and saying, "How do you feel about this?"
Mm-hmm.
And just building that connection. Because when you ask a student, "How do you feel about whatever," the fact that the moon was really big this morning, it could be something simple. And what do you think about full moons? They go, "Oh, I love full moons because, maybe let's say, it's October." So they could talk about a younger child may go on a whole story about werewolves or something. And you can go, "Oh yeah, I get concerned about full moons because it seems like every time there's a full moon, somebody in here does something strange." And we all know teachers and students with full moons and how that goes. But just a simple concern over an event, the moon, just builds that relationship because it shows the student you see them as a whole person with their own thoughts and feelings, and then they want to connect with you even more. I think also competence, demonstrating skill, knowledge, and the will to help and support. One of the big things I found really effective with a lot of my students is that, if we were studying something and someone asked a question and I didn't know, I'll go, "I don't know that, but I can look it up. Do you want to help?" And then we would turn on the projector and we would kind of do a small mini lesson on like how to research something, right? And then, that shows that you're demonstrating the skill to research, but you're also showing them the will to help and support them. "I don't know this, but I'm not going to leave you out on your own to go look it up in the dictionary. We're going to do it together. And I'm going to model how to do that." And then eventually you can kind of, move them to more of an independent learner. And then another one of the strategies that Hammond presented in her book, Culturally Responsive Teaching and the Brain, really talked about learning partnerships. And I think these work very well, especially with students with challenging behaviors. It's almost like not quite a behavior contract, but almost to that level. And it's just like an agreement. You know, this is what I want to learn. This is what I need to be emotionally supported. And then you agreeing to provide those. You know, a lot of times in the beginning of the year, we'll do those worksheets about what are 3 things you want to, you know, what 3 goals you want to accomplish this year, or for those of us who teach students with challenging behaviors or maybe have some emotional dysregulation, we have questions about, you know, what do you do when you're angry or you're sad, or what do you need? We're really taking that worksheet or that conversation, if we do it that way, and building a pact, you know, affirm that I see that these are your goals. I'm going to help you reach those. And this is how I'm going to help you reach those. Or I know you struggle with, you know, frustration. When you get frustrated, sometimes you throw your book. So when I can help you, you know, by giving you cue cards, if you can agree to use the cue card. So it's, you know, it's just an agreement on how we're going to help and support one another. And then be an ally to your students. I think we've all expressed how being an ally has either failed or succeeded in our career tonight. Really focusing on, you know, those teachers that go to bat for students, and really showing them that you're there for them. Letting the student drive their learning, even with our students with challenging behaviors. You know, if they're not engaged or interested, more than likely that behavior is going to get out of control. So let them drive, give them options, give them choice menus, things like that. And then incorporate UDL into all your lessons to maintain the rigor, but also to allow access. So you can provide a higher order text, but maybe at a lower lexile, or break it down with visuals or something like that to really engage them. And of course, make it kind of culturally responsive as well. And then kind of building, what does that physical environment look like? I kind of hinted to it earlier, you know, and we've seen or heard of other examples of this tonight. Putting pictures of yourself and your family in your classroom. I happen to be mixed race. My mom is white and my dad is black. So when I have pictures of my family on my desk, they often ask, you know, hey, Mr. Williams, I thought you were just the black curly haired guy. I'm like, no, I'm half white too. They're like, oh. And then there'll be a whole conversation, you know, what's it like growing up, identifying with 2 races? Like, how do you navigate that? Some of your older students may ask those kind of questions and really start creating a relationship with them as they, you know, figure out their own identity. Or placing your degrees or awards in your room. You're showing your students that, you know, we're all a diverse population of teachers, that we all can do these things and they can too, kind of making that example or putting that example out there. I loved music in my classroom. We would often listen to music from a variety of cultures to, you know, as a warm up or an attention grabber or a transition period. We would, you know, play a song. Some schools I've been in have played music during class transitions, you know, it's just kind of like a gentle cue to get to class on time. And you can use music from around the world to really expose students to all, you know, all the different types of music that are out there. One of the really cool ways to build relationships with your parents is to do an artwork loan. Maybe they can loan you something to put in the classroom that symbolizes, you know, their culture or their practices. It could be, you know, for a themed month or just throughout the year, just kind of rotate different, you know, family heirlooms or whatnots through the classroom to really expose. And that gives the student the opportunity to teach others about themselves. And students often learn best learning from other students. So it really helps build that camaraderie and reinforce the humanity that we're going for. I did want to kind of pause and just ask, you know, has anyone had any interesting experiences in the behavior realm trying to be culturally responsive, or have any questions on, like, how can I support X student who's experiencing this?
Well, this is Ron Marsh from Roanoke, student at Murray Baldwin. For the last 10 years, I've been in a ED classroom where, emotionally disturbed students, some of the young men are very, every day there's a chair knocked over, there's a threat, and I've been in that type of classroom. And it's been a great experience for me to be able to, there's one young man that he was emotionally, had some problems. And I just, decided to go to a baseball game. And I started going to his baseball games, and we developed a great relationship. And I had to find out what covenant, you mentioned covenant and agreements. His type of agreement at home or with his peers was different. So I had to find out how to, make covenant with him, come to agreement. And some of the similar ways that he would come in agreement and act, with his peers, I had to learn how he did that. So once I learned how he reacted, with his baseball players and what they thought about him, then I would, use that relationship or those means of communication in the classroom. Had a great relationship with this young man. He went on to do well in my classroom and stay out of trouble. And we developed a covenant relationship with each other. So it's very important to know how these kids react with their peers so that we can build a better relationship. I'm hoping that.
Definitely. That reminds me of a student I had who he came to me from a residential facility, and it's kind of atypical when we think of diversity, but he happened to be the only white guy in the room, and he played golf, and he was very proud of his golf. And all the other kids were kind of like, I don't understand what you're talking about. Like, what is a par? What's a birdie? What are you talking about? Like, come on now. So for him, he felt socially isolated. And one day I went to one of his golf matches, and then we came back the next morning, and we were talking about it. I made a point to have a conversation, across the room with him about golf, to kind of include the classroom. And that really helped once they saw me kind of take the lead on getting to know him and asking those questions. And sometimes we have to model that for our students.
Exactly. And this
how
kid
to build those relationships with each other, and how to ask those questions. That's a great example.
Yeah, this kid was white. And when my wife and I showed up at his baseball game, we probably was the only African Americans there, right? So, it was a shock to them to see me come. So that relationship built with the family and with the peers, with the father, which mostly just came, he didn't have custody, mostly just came to the games. So that was I felt uncomfortable at first, but then I knew what effect it would have on this kid and his family.
Definitely.
I think that sometimes we forget the kids have emotions, and we tend to dismiss them, and we don't want to let them, figure it out. And like when I used to help some of the general ed teachers with some of my students transition back, I was very careful not to even tell them what they were arrested for, because they would straight up judge them right off the bat. And they would be like, well, Mel, he can't even walk in, he can't do any of his homework, he can't do any of this. And I'm like, well, does he at least walk in the room and sit down? Yeah. I said, well, hello, that's your first compliment right there. You've got to start finding something small, because they don't trust people. They don't trust adults. And in my classroom, I always let my students know, even if you screwed up, Mel's got your back, but you got to tell me before a principal comes rolling down here and telling me, or I'm not going to be able to head it off, and it's amazing that once they know you're part of them and they're a part of you, it means a lot to them. Like, I believe in one positive comment, like at a time. That's what I tell my general ed teachers. And I mean, what do they have to lose? I mean, you're going to lose your whole classroom if you don't start learning how to build a rapport with them. And like, the one thing that I think my kids laugh is I'm a gamer. I love playing Call of Duty. Like, my students like freak out that Miss Mel can play, you know, and they all want to play me. I'm like, nope, I got an 18 or under. Y'all can't play with me. When you grow up, maybe, you know, but they're like, oh my God, you're white and you play a video game? I'm like, sure do. I bet I can beat you. And they're just like, wow. But just be real with them. They can smell you coming down the hall if you're fake.
So I wanted to, so I was working with a student with autism in general ed class, and they taught him there is scary word and good word and bad word. And I said, there is no scary word, my friend. All words are words. So I had the behavior chart, you know, for him. And I told him, I want you to show me, how do you look like when you are happy? He said, you know, the green, yellow, all that. And some days I would come and say, Miss Yusuf today is yellow, or Miss Yusuf is going to the red. And he said, no, Miss Yusuf is always positive. Miss Yusuf is always happy. And I said, no, my friend, Miss Yusuf is a human being. Sometimes I have good days, sometimes I have bad day. And he said, no, I don't believe you. You are always smiling. I said, no, I'm a human being. And so I had to share every day with him, like how I am on the chart. You know, I am green, I am yellow because I'm a human being. And I had to use Superflix. I don't know if you are all familiar, or some of you with Superflix. It's a program for social skills and behavior and things like that. So they have like Mean Jane, and they have like different books with different like character. So and I would explain to him and the other student in my group the characters, who they are and what they do. And he told me I am Mean Jane, and Mean Jane had the control of my brain. So, you know, there is strategies on how you can get off Mean Jane and be a nice you. So one day I said, why don't you make up your own character? And it was very interesting to see what's in his brain, what is taking over his brain, his fears, what he's worried about. It was very helpful. So.
Naveen, can you share the story about when you were sick, when you were not feeling well? You told us in the diversity meeting, and how you changed the schedule and how your students reacted.
Oh, so, you know, distance learning is very funny right now because I'm working with kids with autism, and, you know, changing routine threw them off. So I think it was like last week or the week before, I was not feeling well, and I did the morning meeting, and I forgot to put the months of the year song. And then one of my students was crying, and I was like, what's going on? Why you are crying? And then her helper said, Miss Yusuf, you forgot to put the days of the week song. And I'm so sorry. Days of the week song, a months of the year song is coming up to make her happy, because, you know, changing routine threw them off. Even people, if I'm sick one day, my kids don't act well at all. And I come back to school and they are like, okay, your kids were acting up, because we changed the routine, we changed the people. If one of my assistant is out too, I see lots of behavior because they don't feel good. You change the routine, people or schedule, like you threw them off.
Mm-hmm. I also think Steve made a good point about taking CRT a little too far sometimes, that we want to create a relationship with the student, and it may come off that we are using stereotypes or exaggerating certain things. So I think, you know, when we're engaging in this work, we have to remain cognizant of our own authenticity. And you have to be authentic when you're working with your students and their families, and really understanding culture versus stereotypes, and how, getting past that surface level culture, really getting into the deep culture about, worldview and ethics and, beyond just style of dress or food. That's how you can really make those authentic connections. And sometimes, if you don't have a lived experience to really share with a certain culture, that, you just may not, you may not be sure that it works. You could always just ask, in a very non-confrontational way, about the culture. I heard, is this true? Could you explain, or how does this work? And a lot of times people don't have a problem, if it's a genuine question about how things operate. So I wanted to point that out, that we do have to maintain authenticity when we're connecting with our students.
Richard or Mel, there's a question here in the chat. It kind of goes well with your slide and what you're discussing. It says, from your experience, what tips could you share for culturally responsive decorations in a classroom, and also flyers?
Sure. So for my classroom, I taught, my last few years teaching was in a high school public day level self-contained program within the public day, because we had some stuff to work on. But I had students who identified on the LGBT plus spectrum, and I had a diverse ethnic group, diverse, there students who identified as both female and male, and all kinds of things. So when I kind of got my caseload at the beginning of the year, I printed little flags. So I had like a little 2-inch LGBT flag. I had a trans flag. I had a Black Lives Matter flag. I had all these different flags, and I just put them on my little window of my mobile classroom. And when they walked in, they go, "Oh my God, I've never seen a teacher, put a rainbow flag on their classroom. That makes me feel so comfortable that I can just be me here." I didn't say anything. I just put a little rainbow flag on my window, and they immediately felt like, okay, I'm safe here. And it took a little color ink, and that was all we needed. Other things that I've done is, as we've done different parts of maybe world history or world geography, I may have the students really explore a different facet of the culture, and then we make a bulletin board in the classroom with blurbs about their spot or their specific focus of the culture, and really creates this whole culture web or tree almost, that we're learning and then we're learning about, and we add to it as we go. So it helps them, with their academic skills, but also just helps create a nice room, because they do some amazing artwork sometimes, and it really engages them in the classroom.
One thing I did when I worked in Virginia Beach, I had out in one of the portables, I had, I think, at one time 12 ED students. 10 were Black boys and 2 were white boys. And it broke my heart, and that the curriculum doesn't show positive male role models that have created stuff. Because Richard and I've talked about this, that, put up pictures. We researched and we put up pictures of guys that have invented stuff of color, and they would look and they're like, huh. I'm like, shocking, because I always tried to find stuff, and I hope I don't cry, but it just broke my heart, because these boys literally thought there was no positive, there was nothing that their culture had done to create to help this country go along. And I'm like, well, let me show you. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I just think that needs to be more in our curriculum, So that's what I would do. I would do it based on my students. I always had plants in my room. I know it sounds cheesy, but I always made my classroom feel like a day camp, not like they're in residential camp, but like they're outdoors, and just, you have to treat them like they're your own. You can't be hateful to them because they walk in mad, because when my son Isaiah walks in mad, I don't sit there and jump on his butt. Well, okay, maybe one time I have, but you know what I mean? You have to treat them like you're your own kids. And I do that. And it's amazing, the more you just connect with them, the more they'll do for you, you know? And then you got to bribe them when they go back into the general ed room. You're like, listen, you can do it. I got faith in you.
Mhm. I think one of the big things I try to always remember when I'm teaching or doing anything in the education realm is that I want anybody I interact with to feel affirmed in their humanity. I think if we look at society and current events, that's one thing we're losing hold of, is seeing humanity in everyone and affirming that we're all humans and we're all important and we all are valued. And I know when we've had those moments where someone affirms us or reminds us of our importance, how that makes us feel. And I want to make sure that my students always feel that coming from me, and they never feel the opposite, because the opposite is soul crushing. But I always want to be there to uplift them. You know, we could have a complete meltdown in a classroom and, you know, I got a hole in the wall or a broken window and there's some furniture destroyed. But once we're calm and we're safe, we're going to have a talk, you know, just like we're a normal person. The next day, hey, good morning. How are you? You feeling better today? Awesome. Let's get to work. Really just always affirming that humanity in everyone. And that is kind of the root of CRT for me. You know, just acknowledging that there are so many different types of individuals, humans in the world, and that they're all important and they all should be celebrated and seen throughout history, because we've all, of all the various cultures, have contributed to the advancement of the human race. So really just being an exemplar and a model for that. Are there any other questions or comments? I know we're getting close to 6, so we've got some time.
No.
If you guys look on the resource page that Richard and I created for you, the first 2 are books, but the first one is the teacher's resource guide. And like, let's say you're struggling with a certain teacher, and I mean, I think every general ed teacher should have this book, and they have a kid who's who's fidgeting. You can go to you can find it in the table of contents, and you can go to that page and there's 15, 20 strategies you could use.
Yeah.
And all of these right here do not necessarily have to deal with the student who's already been given that disability, emotional disturb.
Thank you for that. Great. Thank you, Mel and Richard. Geez, I'm getting weepy over here. You brought it home. You did a great job. You know what I love about it is, especially you, Mel, you speak from the heart.
Yeah.
You know, you're not sugarcoating, you're just telling it like it is in your world. And we appreciate that. We appreciate your honesty and you sharing your story. And thank you, everyone. This is our 3rd webinar. This has been the best chat we've had yet. I mean, you guys have so many great comments and ideas and thoughts, and really, I love it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely best participants.
Yeah. Richard, can you go to the next slide?
Yeah.
Please? Are you finished? I'm sorry.
Yes.
There we go. Okay, so we have another presentation that we will be uploading to YouTube. Lysander Cook and I will both be presenting on culturally relevant teaching and positive and instructive feedback. So we'll have another 20-minute session that we will include with the YouTube video and with the PowerPoint presentation links also.
And if you're wondering how to get to the YouTube video, you can go to the vcld.org website, and there is a page of links to our webinar. So the video link will be there.
Yep.
And I'm pretty sure if you follow Virginia CEC on Twitter, we will be posting a link to
Yes.
that as well.
Yeah, check out the Virginia CEC's YouTube channel at Virginia CEC. It'll be on there also.
Do you want to put that in the chat, Mike?
Yep, I can do that.
Okay. And Richard, can you go to the next slide, please? Well, next. Okay. So our next event will be co-teaching, and we have Clara Houth. I saw Clara come into the room. I don't know if she's still here, but anyway, she is an author, and she will be presenting some information about co-teaching. And then we also will have a panelist of groups of or pairs of co-teachers. So we're going to have the theory with Clara and, you know, all the information behind co-teaching, and then we'll have the practical part with the actual co-teachers who are going to share their stories, talk about virtual co-teaching. You know, this is not just for special educators, it's for general educators. And even if you're not a co-teacher or you have never wanted to, you don't know when you're going to be voluntold to be a co-teacher. Okay, research supports that. So come on out, come back and see us, and you know, tell everybody you know. So there's a registration link there, and then the certificate of completion that you will take to your HR people, certificate of completion. And I think that may be the last.
And Mindy,
Yeah.
I just wanted to put a plug in. I wanted to thank Old Dominion University for letting us use their Zoom software and their registration software, and also specifically Kristen White, because she has helped us on all of our webinars with any questions we've asked about how best to run them.
And we have a lot of questions, so she's
Yes.
wonderful.
She's so
Yeah,
patient.
So there's information about our next webinar. Claire is a co-author of the Survivor Guide for New Special Education Teachers. Great book. So she's going to just be telling it like it is. And then again, we'll have some classroom teachers talking about their experiences. And I think there's one more slide, just contact information. Oh, Virginia CEC is much better at Twitter than VCLD is. We kind of do Facebook because we're older. I don't know. Anyway, you can contact us there. And then some more contact numbers at the end. So thank you, everybody, really, spending your Friday afternoon, 100 people logging on Friday afternoon. It's inspiring. So thank you so much. Great job, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you next month.